So welcome back to another great Dark Beyond card review. Today we're going to take a look at all the Druid stuff. To remind you, we did have a few cards revealed previously, which we'll recap here in a minute, but I want to kick things off with a brand new legendary Ulu, the Ever Drifter. He is a 5-mana 6/5 beast, and he reads, each turn this is in your hand, gain 2 random choose 1 choices. And basically, that's going to grab choose 1 choices from cards in your current format. So you play this in standard. These are the standard format choose 1 cards. It's just going to pick one here, pick one there, and that's what Ulu is going to do. Now, these do range from low-cost stuff to high-cost stuff. There's probably a little bit more low-cost, 1, 2, 3s than high-cost stuff. And in particular, most of the high-cost things are attached to minions, which, do eat up a part of the card's cost budget. So even if it's like a 7-cost card, that doesn't mean it's a 7-mana value on the choose 1 necessarily, right? Like part of that's the minion itself. That said, some of these are still really high output. Stuff like Freya is probably the best bet you're going to get. Like duplicate your hand, summon copies of all other friendly minions. Those could both be enormous plays for board or value. Cenarius, yeah, he's okay. Give your other minions +2/+2. Situationally could be good. Same thing for Drum Circle. Ancient of Lore, draw 2 cards, restore 7 health. 5 mana, draw 2 is fine, especially in combination with something else. So there are some good results, and there's some other mediocre results, discover a beast. You're probably not mad about that, but it's not like something you're excited about certainly either. Give a friendly minion +2 attack and rush. Okay, that's fine, but how often is that really going to line up to be a meaningful sort of play? Power the Wild, summon a 3/2 Panther. Again, it's fine. It's upside. The stats on the Ulu aren't bad, so all of this is solid stuff to do on a 5-drop. You're just not over the moon. Now there are some absolute low rolls like Gloomstone Guardian. These are just both bad things. Discard 2 cards or destroy 1 of your mana crystals. So sometimes you roll that and it's just gonna lock you out, or you're just not gonna want to play this for a turn. And then there are other instances too, stuff like Ancient of Growth. Transform your Treants into 5/5 Ancients with Taunt. That's just probably not going to do anything because you're usually not going to have Treants in a random deck. So I guess the takeaway here is sometimes it will be actively bad because of the Gloomstone guy, but most of the time it's not going to be bad. It's just going to be okay, this 5-drop did a little extra and I'm excited. I got a little minion, I got a little buff, I got an extra card or 2, and that's okay. And then occasionally you'll hope for a crazy high roll with something like Freya, or you do have a board and you roll +2/+2 buff off Cenarius and +2/+4 buff off Drum Circle, and it's boom, game over, right? Those moments will happen. I do worry though that sometimes the situational stuff just isn't gonna line up. It's oh, okay, I got Wrath, but I don't really need to Wrath anything right now. And it's okay, the Ulu's just kind of sitting here. I kind of wish I could play this, but now I feel like I need to hold it for later. So it's going to be this question kind of how greedy do you want to get? How crazy do the results need to be? How consistently good does this need to be? A lot of decks have very refined strategies. They have game plans they're driving towards. And sometimes cards like this that are just kind of floaters, they just sort of sit in hand waiting for the right moment, or, sometimes do something really cool. Sometimes they get cut because you need decks that are reliable and they're pushing towards your win condition and they're pushing towards your synergy. And it's normally I'd say maybe this goes in a Reno deck, but maybe not. Maybe the Reno deck needs more dragons or something for the dragon game plan, or committed to synergistic packages, and Ulu, maybe he gets left out. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I think this is generically useful enough that a Reno deck probably does make room for Ulu, but at the same time, as packages come in to fruition, it's we're going to talk about an arcane spell package here in a minute with the Starship pieces, with all these arcane spell cards. There's probably not going to be room for Ulu in a deck like this because it just needs to really push for the arcane spells, right? So it's at the same time a generically useful card that any deck can run, but also a generically useful card that a lot of decks won't need to run. Which I think kind of leaves it in an average spot. I think it's just going to feel okay in many instances. Now, Druid as a class does have more mana and sometimes more card draw, which cards like this are just sort of free to run if you've got a lot of cards in hand and it's just sitting there waiting for its moment. So I'm like moderately hopeful for this guy. I think he's really cool looking as a giant space turtle, so I kind of want this to see play. But compared to many of the broken, crazy, cheat style stuff Druid does, I won't be surprised if he falls short. So next up here is the Star Grazer. This card's really cool. 8 mana, 8/8 beast, elusive, taunt, and spell burst. Give your hero +8 attack this turn and gain 8 armor, which that's really big. That's a lot of payoff here, man. 8 damage and 8 life gained attached to this mildly annoying body. Reminder, elusive means can't be targeted by spells or hero powers. That finally got keyworded in case you're joining us from years ago. So, you know, normally I would say for most classes, like 8 mana is still too slow, even though this does a lot and it has aggression and it has defense baked into it. It's basically the Druid like quest line reward from Stormwind. You know, that was Guff. He was 5 mana. This is 8 mana, but still pretty nuts for not having to play a quest first. I would say most classes like it's too expensive, but for Druid, man, with ramp, with so much excess mana, I think there's actually room to run this. I think Druids can fit this in. It still has a question of deck fit. It's like, you know, is just a big ramp Druid going to do enough? But there's enough lethality baked into this because 8 is just a big number that can go face, that can help you end games. And, you know, the armor gain too is nice. Like it's a stabilizing tool, both because of the annoying taunt body that some decks will have a challenge to remove. And that armor gain too is pretty cool. Now, you know, the fact that this is spell burst and elusive and taunt, it feels kind of random. I guess the idea is that maybe sometimes you'll have to play this out ASAP. Like you have 8 mana, you slam the Star Grazer, you hope it lives into the future turn thanks to elusive, and then, you know, the spell burst is activated later. But for Druid, it's going to be so easy to activate the spell burst with all the various cheap spells they have, Innervate, you know, chief among them. So it's a little weird how all these things went together, elusive, taunt, and spell burst. Those aren't keywords that I would naturally mesh, so there must have been some intent there for keeping it alive for multiple turns, but I don't think it's a concern. I think this card actually just has big enough numbers to be an interesting piece of the puzzle for Druid. So moving on over to the Starship piece here, the Shatari Cloakfield, a 2 mana 1/3 with elusive again, and your first spell each turn costs 1 less. I want to remind you, we have already seen some Starship stuff for Druid. There was the other Starship piece, the Starlight Reactor. After you cast an arcane spell, recast it with targets chosen randomly. That's 3 mana 3/3. And we saw Exarch Othar, the legendary, who rewards you for having Starship. If you're building a Starship, get 3 different arcane spells and reduce their cost by 2. So this brings in a spell discount off the Shatari Cloakfield, spell generation and discount off of Exarch Othar specifically for arcane spells, and then also arcane spell recasting on the Starlight Reactor. Now, these both looked insane to me, Othar and Starlight Reactor. We also got a previously seen arcane spell, Distress Signal, summon 2 random 2-cost minions, and refresh 2 mana crystals. So again, mana cheat, crazy card generation, tons of mana discount, mana refresh. All of that is just like a recipe for completely blowing people up. And we're going to see even more arcane spells to add into this package. Like they went hard on arcane spells here. Arcanite Revelation, 1 mana arcane spell. Draw a card. If it's a spell, it costs 1 less. Card draw. So more resources, more discounts. Insane. Like that looks really good. Astral Phaser, 2 mana arcane spell. Choose one. Deal 2 damage to 2 random enemy minions, or make 1 dormant for 2 turns. So a little bit of board reactivity here. I think that dormant in particular could be pretty cool. Remember that these all have the potential to be recast off of your Starship. So this is not just like 1 mana draw a card. It's now 1 mana draw 2 cards, and they each get discounted. This is now like maybe deal 2 damage to 4 times to the board, or make multiple enemy minions dormant because it's being recast, because it's an arcane spell. We also got Cosmic Phenomenon, a 5 mana arcane spell. Summon 3 2/3 elementals with taunt. If your board is full, give your minions +1/+1. So again, if you already have some stuff on board from your Starship, that 4 mana spell is summoning some 2-cost minions. You play this, the board fills up, you get a +1/+1 buff. It recasts, gives you another +1/+1 buff. You can see how suddenly, if you have enough mana cheat and you have enough mana overall for your Starship, you're going to just create these absolutely monster turns where you're clearing up the opponent's board by making everything dormant or wiping it out. You're building this own giant board of your own. including a Starship that has elusive, by the way. You know, you're just piling on all of these various arcane spells, and we're not even done. We also have the Final Frontier 7-mana spell. Discover a 10-cost minion from the past and set its cost to 1. So you're also generating, like, you know, maybe you don't want to play these right away because you just like filled up your board or whatever, but you know, suddenly you're also now creating like a hand that can blow up the next turn. So even if your opponent starts to deal with all the stuff you just did off your crazy Starship turn, it's like, now maybe I have some stuff for later. I will acknowledge, like, 7 mana might be hard to fit in alongside everything else, but with enough mana refresh and discounts, you might at least get one of these off and then recast it so you have some crazy cheap 10-cost cards for later. So ultimately, this is a really cohesive package. Like, sometimes we get these card packages in classes and it's like, oh, they got 3 Draenei, and it's like, okay, well, what are they going to do with 3 Draenei? It's like, Druid, dude, they got the dream commitment here for arcane spells, and they all seem like they're going to be pretty relevant to making all of this work. So, you know, spend 5 mana on your reactor and just go crazy and just get like obscene value, obscene board, so many discounts. It's like none of these are like outright game winning because none are like going face for lethality or anything, but it feels like it's going to create such a swing turn just because the board is going to be so overwhelmed with stuff. Some of that's going to have taunt. You know, some of the board's going to be reacted to thanks to Astral Phaser. We didn't even talk about the arcane spells already in Druid as well. I mean, we did in the previous review, but we should pull those up real quick. There are things to remember, like Sleep Under the Stars, which it could be even more insane mana cheat. Oh my god, actually Sparkling File is a way to deal extra damage. I mean, you need some spell damage probably to help, but there's a, you know, couple extra arcane spells here too that might play well with like a spell damage package mixed in. You got the location and so on, and it's like, boom, dude, just forget it. This is going to be absolutely silly watching all of this sort of stuff unfold. It feels like Druid once again just got an absolutely crazy line. Now, I will acknowledge a couple things, right? Like, these Starship pieces have to die for all of this to start happening. You have to play an Exarch Othar for all of this to start happening. So it's a little bit slow to get moving, particularly if you're also trying to ramp and stay alive in the meantime. So that might be the kind of balancing act on this, is that, yeah, once you get a complete Starship and you start playing all these arcane spells, sure, you're going to run away with the game, but how safely and how quickly can you get to that point as a Druid who's running all this stuff? And it might be a little harder, but, you know, it doesn't hurt that some of this helps you along the way, right? Like, this helps you perhaps cheat out a spell a little bit faster. Maybe the Cloak Field gets you some recovery. And Othar, like, maybe you play 1 or 2 of these arcane spells right away because they're cheap. You know, suddenly you can whip out an Astral Phaser or whatever, and that helps you stabilize a little bit. So it's not like you have to commit everything all at once. And, you know, Starlight Reactor, just play it with, again, an Astral Phaser or something, and that's your stabilizer because it recast it, and it's like, boom, okay, that gives me the time I need to set up for the big Starship turn later. So I do personally think all of this lines up really, really well to do some pretty cool stuff, and that makes Arcane Starship Druid a fairly scary proposition. So I will talk about each of these cards just a little bit individually, kind of to talk about how individually good they are, but I think as the package as a whole, like, these are pretty great, and I think you will probably run most of these. So just to recap on this Starship piece, like, this actually might be one you could cut. I don't think you have to have this necessarily. It's pretty cool to make your Starship elusive because that could make it very hard to kill if it has a ton of health. Like, you know, suddenly spells don't easily deal with it, or at least, you know, targeted spells. So that could be a little bit challenging, but I wouldn't be totally shocked if this got cut, because the only 1 cost discount, you know, 1 time per turn, does not compete necessarily with a lot of the other mana cheat and discounts Druid has access to. So don't be shocked if this one gets cut. I think it's possible. This card to me just looks really nice. You know, it's just a little bit of a cycle that, you know, if you're recasting it, if you're generating it, all of those things are going to be great. The cost discount coming in too kind of helps you set up for later. So that looks fantastic. Astral Phaser, in a weird way, kind of looks the least compelling to me, but it does offer something Druid needs and might really need on these kind of stabilization turns on the Starship, which is removal, right? Even Dormant is removal if you win the game by the time they come back. And for small boards too, the 2 damage pings could be removal, or if you combo that with spell damage as teased, those 2 damage pings could suddenly become even better. So I do think this will actually be important though. Even if you looked at this card like outside of the Arcane package and all of the rest of this, I'd be like, oh, I'm not that excited about it. But ultimately, in combo with that, I think it's pretty great. Cosmic Phenomenon, as one of the more expensive cards, I do have more questions about, but I will acknowledge it plays really well for building that big board with Distress Signal, because this is summoning you 2 random 2-cost minions that could go off twice on your Starship. That's suddenly 4 minions. This already fills your board when you count for the Starship too. So you're getting these buffs that really helps us, build that crazy threatening board that otherwise might just be kind of small stuff that doesn't go far enough. So I think this will make the cut. It's not the most exciting reason necessarily to do all of this, but it does still seem important. And then Final Frontier, I wonder if this one gets there. Like, it's so expensive, it's going to be hard to weave in. This might be one where you're sometimes excited to get it off Othar or something, and you're just like, okay, this worked out, it was fine. It was a nice bonus, but maybe you don't run it in the deck list necessarily because it is pretty hefty. And looking at the 10 cost stuff from Wild, some of this will still actually be in standard and probably won't count, but it's a mixed bag, right? There's faceless behemoths, there's stuff that's like, just random like flesh giants or whatever you're not going to be excited about. Like, you're going to get 3 giants sometimes, like, okay, whatever. Some of it's win condition-y, like Hakar, and maybe Emrys could be a win condition if it costs 1. Like, there's a few things that definitely feel like they could pull a game in your favor, but a lot of others that just don't do much. So it's really going to be like, hey, I got an 8-8, I got a 10-10 or whatever that's cheap, but it's not that cheap because you're spending 8 on it. So that's why I'm saying, like, when this gets discounted or replayed, it's cool. That's a nice bonus. But paying full cost for this, running it honestly in your deck, I'm not so sure it's necessary. All right, so with all that said, let's give these cards ratings from 1 to 5 stars. Ulu the Everdrifter is a 3-star card. Stargrazer is a 4-star card. Shatari Cloakfield is a 3-star card. Arcanite Revelation is a 4-star card. Astral Phaser is a 4-star card. Cosmic Phenomenon is a 4-star card. Final Frontier is a 2-star card. And there you go. That's the Druid stuff. Remember, we already reviewed these previously, and yeah, I think they got at least one really cohesive and potentially very powerful package. And Ulu's like he's just fine, man. I wish I thought he was better than he was because he looks so cool. But maybe he'll be one of those decks or cards that just shows up in a lot of decks. I'm gonna get to see him a lot, which would be pretty fun. And maybe he's crazy busted. Who knows? I want to hear your thoughts on that and more in the comments below. Thanks so much as always for watching, and until next time, game on.